They banned me from every wedding like a family tradition, pretending I did not exist. However, the one time I had my own wedding, they showed up like I owed them a front row seat. They did not miss me. They needed something with my name on it. By the time they begged for an invitation, they were not afraid of losing a wedding. They were afraid of losing everything they had built on top of my silence. My name is Ivy Cox, and for 29 years, I had trained myself to be invisible. Invisibility was safe. Invisibility meant I did not have to smile while my heart was breaking, and it meant I did not have to explain why I was the only one standing outside the frame of the family portrait. But tonight, in my small apartment in Briar Glen, Colorado, I was doing something that required me to be seen. I was writing my name. The tip of my fountain pen scratched against the cream-colored cardstock. Ivy Cox and Miles Hart. It looked strange to see those two names together. Unhidden and apologetic. Outside, the wind was howling through the pines, a common sound for a Tuesday night in the mountains. But inside, it was warm. The smell of cinnamon tea drifted from the kitchen where Miles was finishing the dishes. I looked at the stack of finished envelopes. There were only 40 of them. 40 people who actually knew the color of my eyes. 40 people who knew how I took my coffee. 40 people who would not ask me to move out of the way so the photographer could get a better shot of my siblings. I was just about to seal the envelope addressed to Mrs. Gable, my third-grade teacher, who had once told me I was worth listening to. When the sound shattered the peace, the doorbell did not just ring, it screamed. It was a long, jagged, insistent sound, followed immediately by 3 sharp raps on the wood. It was not the knock of a neighbor returning a package or a friend stopping by for a chat. It was the knock of authority. It was the sound of someone who believed they owned the space on the other side of the door. My hand jerked, and a single drop of black ink splattered onto the pristine envelope, ruining Mrs. Gable's name. I stared at the ink blot for a second, my heart hammering against my ribs. I knew that knock. I had spent my entire childhood jumping at that specific rhythm. Miles appeared in the hallway, drying his hands on a towel. His brow was furrowed, his body language shifting from relaxed to alert in a split second. "Expecting anyone?" he asked, his voice low. "No," I whispered. But deep down, I think I knew. You can move 2 states away. You can change your phone number. And you can build a life based on honesty and respect. But you can never truly outrun the people who think they own you. I stood up, my legs feeling heavier than usual. I walked to the door, Miles trailing a few feet behind me, a silent shadow of support. I did not look through the peephole. I did not need to. I unlocked the deadbolt and pulled the door open. The air in the hallway was freezing, but the chill that ran down my spine had nothing to do with the Colorado weather. Standing on my welcome mat, arranged in a terrifyingly perfect formation, were my 4 siblings, Graham, Renee, Caleb, and the youngest, all of them dressed not for travel, but for a boardroom meeting. They looked like a committee. They looked like a wall. Graham, the eldest, stood in the center, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my car. Renee was to his left, her makeup flawless, her expression pinched with that familiar mix of pity and judgment. Caleb stood with his arms crossed, leaning back slightly as if just being here was exhausting for him. They did not smile. They did not say hello. They did not shout, "Surprise!" or "Congratulations." Graham spoke first. His voice was smooth, cultured, and laced with the specific type of venom that only family knows how to inject. "Where is the guest list? Ivy?" The question hung in the cold air, bizarre and demanding. He did not ask how I was. He did not ask if he could come in. He asked for paperwork. "Don't look at me like that," Graham continued, stepping forward, forcing me to take a half step back into my own entryway. "We need to see the names. Don't embarrass the family with some ragtag group of nobodies." I blinked, trying to process the sheer audacity of their presence. They were here, in Briar Glen, at my door, demanding control over an event they had not even been invited to. Then I saw it. In Graham's left hand, clutched tightly against his chest, was a folded piece of paper. It was not just any paper. I recognized the font. I recognized the layout. It was a printout of my wedding itinerary, the timeline, the venue details, the specific breakdown of the ceremony at Juniper Ridge Gardens. The blood drained from my face. I had sent that draft to exactly 3 people: my wedding planner, Miles, and the venue coordinator. It was a private document. It was my document. "Where did you get that?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly, not from fear, but from a sudden, white-hot rage. Graham waved the paper dismissively. "That is not important. What is important is that we caught this disaster in time. A mourning ceremony? No assigned seating? Ivy? Honestly, it looks cheap. Mom is practically having palpitations." "Mom isn't here," I said, my voice gaining a little more steel. "We represent her interests," Renee chimed in, stepping up beside Graham. She looked around my small apartment, her nose wrinkling slightly at the sight of my cozy, lived-in living room. "And honestly, we are here to save you from yourself, again." Miles moved then. He stepped up beside me, his shoulder brushing mine. He was taller than Graham, broader, and far less interested in playing games. He did not look at my siblings with anger, but with a calm, terrifying vigilance. "Do you want me to close the door, Ivy?" Miles asked. His voice was steady. He was not telling me what to do. He was not taking over. He was offering me a choice. He was ready to shut the door in their faces, regardless of their expensive suits and their demands. If that was what I wanted, I looked at him, and then I looked back at Graham. For a second, I felt the urge to slam the door, to hide, to retreat into the safety of the life I had built. But then I looked at the itinerary in Graham's hand again. They had stolen my privacy. They had tracked me down. They had come here not to celebrate me, but to edit me. They wanted to fix my wedding the same way they had tried to fix my entire life, by erasing the parts they did not like. I did not step back. I planted my feet on the hardwood floor. "No, Miles," I said. I looked Graham dead in the eye. "Keep it open." I squared my shoulders. "Speak fast," I said, my voice devoid of the warmth I usually reserved for guests. "I have work." Graham looked taken aback. He was used to Ivy the doormat, Ivy the shadow, Ivy who said thank you for the scraps. He blinked, clearly engaging in a mental recalculation. "We are just trying to help," he said, changing his tone to that patronizing, elder brother smoothness. "You know you are not good with details. Ivy, you get emotional. We just want to make sure the family image remains intact. If people find out you are having a backyard affair, it reflects poorly on all of us." Reflects poorly. The words triggered a memory so sharp it felt like a physical blow. Suddenly, I was not 29, I was 19. Flashback, the air in the living room was thick with the smell of expensive lilies. I was standing in front of my mother, Marianne, holding a heavy cream-colored envelope. It was an invitation to Graham's wedding. The calligraphy was beautiful. It swirled and danced across the paper. I had been so excited. I had bought a dress. I had saved 3 months of wages from my part-time job at the diner to afford it. A blue chiffon dress that made me feel, for the first time, like I was pretty, like I belonged. I opened the envelope. I pulled out the card. I scanned the text, looking for my name among the bridal party, or even just as a special guest. My name was not there. And then I saw the note clipped to the back, written in my mother's jagged, hasty handwriting. "Ivy. Guest list is strictly limited by the bride's family. No siblings under 21. You understand." I looked up at my mother. She was arranging flowers in a vase, her back to me. "Mom," I said, my voice small. "But I am 19. I am his sister." She turned around, her expression perfectly composed, a mask of gentle disappointment. Not disappointment in the situation, but disappointment in me for making it awkward. "Oh, Ivy," she sighed, wiping her hands on a towel. "Do not be difficult. It is just a rule. It is out of our hands. Besides, you are the mature one. You understand these things. We need you to help with the logistics anyway. Someone needs to coordinate the vendors from the back entrance." "But I wanted to watch him get married," I said, tears pricking my eyes. "I bought a dress." "You can wear the dress another time," she said, turning back to the flowers. "Don't be selfish. Ivy, this isn't about you. It's about the family. You're the one we can count on to be reasonable. Reasonable, mature, understanding. Those were not compliments. They were commands. They were the words they used to silence me. They banned me because I did not fit the aesthetic. I was not polished enough, not successful enough, not shiny enough to be in the front row. I was the backstage crew. I was the invisible sister. End flashback. I blinked, bringing myself back to the cold doorway in Briar Glen. The memory tasted like ash in my mouth. Graham was still talking, waving the stolen itinerary. "We need to add at least 50 people, business associates, and we need to change the venue. The country club in Silvercrest is available if we pull some strings." I looked at them, really looked at them. They stood there, 4 perfectly groomed vultures, waiting to pick the meat off the bones of my happiness. They did not care that I was in love. They did not care that Miles made me laugh. They did not care that for the first time in my life, I was happy. They cared that my wedding was an asset they had not yet capitalized on. They cared that there was an event with the name Cox attached to it that they were not controlling. A cold, hard realization settled in my chest. It was clearer than it had ever been. They were not here because they missed me. They were not here because they regretted banning me from their weddings. They were not here because of familial love or a sudden desire for reconciliation. They were here because they needed something. I looked at the itinerary in Graham's hand, and then at the anxious, greedy look in Renee's eyes. They did not come for the relationship. They came for the rights. They came because they thought I was still the 19-year-old girl who would agree to stand by the back entrance just to be allowed in the building. But that girl did not live here anymore. I took a deep breath, inhaling the cold mountain air, and for the first time in my life, I did not feel the need to explain myself. I just felt the need to protect what was mine. The dress cost me $350. To anyone else in my family, that amount was negligible, a rounding error on a catering bill or the price of a single bottle of wine. But for me, at 19 years old, working double shifts at a diner that smelled perpetually of burnt coffee and grease, it was everything. It was navy blue silk, simple but elegant, the kind of dress that whispered rather than shouted. I had bought it because I wanted to match the color scheme of the wedding. I wanted to look like I belonged in the frame. I kept it in the plastic garment bag at the back of my closet, touching the fabric every night before bed. It was my armor, if I looked the part. I thought, maybe they would finally treat me like the part. But the week before Graham's wedding at Silvercrest Hall, the script changed. It did not happen with a scream or a fight. It happened in the kitchen, over the sound of my mother chopping vegetables. "It is just a regulation from the bride's side," Mom said, not looking up from the cutting board. "The Hendersons are very particular. Ivy, they want an intimate ceremony, ultra-private. You know how these old money families are about security and exclusivity." I stood there, gripping the edge of the granite counter. "But I am the groom's sister," I said, my voice sounding younger and smaller than I wanted it to. "How can a wedding be too private for the groom's sister?" "It is complicated," she sighed, wiping her hands on a towel. "Look, we do not want to cause a scene, do we? You are the mature one. Ivy, we need you to be understanding. Besides, we need your help with the back end. Someone has to make sure the gift bags are assembled correctly. The planner charges extra for that." That was how it started. I was not banned. I was reassigned. For the next 4 days, I became a ghost in my own house, while Graham was getting fitted for his tuxedo and Renee was getting facials. I was in the dining room, surrounded by boxes of expensive chocolates and ribbons. I folded 500 napkins. I tied 500 bows until my fingers were raw and blistered. I organized the seating charts, placing name cards for cousins I had not seen in years, for business partners Graham barely knew, and for distant friends of the bride. I saw names of people who had never sent Graham a birthday card. I saw names of people who only called when they needed money. They all had a seat. They all had a designated plate of filet mignon. I kept waiting for my card. I kept thinking, maybe they are saving the best spot for last. On the morning of the wedding, I woke up early. I showered and did my hair the way I had practiced. I put on the navy blue dress. I looked in the mirror and, for a second, I saw someone worthy. I saw a Cox. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text from Graham. Do not come to the venue. Security is tight. They have a list, and you are not on it. Do not make this difficult for Mom. Stay home. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. It was not a request. It was an order. Security is tight. As if I were a threat. As if I were a crasher. I did not stay home. I could not. I got into my rusted sedan, the one with the cracked bumper that Graham always made fun of, and I drove to Silvercrest Hall. I parked 2 lots away, hidden behind a row of delivery trucks. I could see the white tent peaks rising above the hedges. I could hear the faint sound of a string quartet playing Pachelbel's Canon. I sat in the driver's seat, the engine off, shivering in my $350 dress. I pulled up the live stream link that a cousin had posted on social media. The camera angle was perfect. It swept across the manicured lawn, the arch of white roses, and the rows of gold Chiavari chairs. I saw my parents in the front row. My mother was dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief. My father looked proud, his chest puffed out. Renee and Caleb were there, standing near the altar, looking glossy and perfect, and then the camera panned to the empty seat next to my mother. It was not empty because someone was missing. It was occupied by a designer handbag. My mother had placed her purse on the chair where her daughter should have been. I watched the vows on a cracked iPhone screen. I watched my brother promise to love and cherish his new wife, surrounded by everyone he claimed to care about. When the ceremony ended and the applause broke out, I turned off the phone. I sat there in silence for an hour, just watching the sun go down over the venue, feeling the cold seep into my bones. I did not cry. That was the strange part. I felt hollowed out, scraped clean of any emotion except a dull, aching clarity. A week later, Graham and his new wife came back from their honeymoon in Bora Bora. We had a family dinner, ordered in, of course. Graham was glowing, tan and victorious. He tossed a plastic bag onto my lap. "Souvenir," he said, grinning. I opened it. Inside was a white t-shirt with the logo of the Silvercrest Resort printed on the front. It was a size too large. It was something you bought at the airport gift shop as an afterthought. "Thanks for holding down the fort," Graham said. Reaching out to ruffle my hair, I flinched, but he did not notice. "Next time up, kiddo. When you are a little more established, we will get you on the list. You know how it is. Image is everything." Image. That night, I went to my room and took out my phone. I did not text my friends to complain. I did not post a sad status update. Instead, I opened a new note. I typed the date, September 12th, 2016. I typed the event, Graham's wedding. I typed the quote, "Do not come. Security will make it difficult." I did not know why I was doing it. It felt petty. It felt cold. But I needed to prove to myself that it had happened. I knew my family. In a year, they would rewrite this. They would say I was sick. They would say I chose to stay home. They would say I was too busy with school. They would gaslight me until I believed their version of history. I was about to close the phone when a notification popped up. It was an email. It was from the wedding planner, forwarded to me by mistake, because I had been the one corresponding with the florists. It was a final invoice summary, but attached to the bottom was an email thread between the planner and Graham. My eyes scanned the text. "Graham," the planner wrote, "just to confirm final numbers for the seating chart. We have 302 guests." Graham's reply was underneath. "Make it 301. Remove Ivy from the chart. We do not want her in the photos. She does not fit the vibe we are going for. Tell her it is a venue restriction if she asks. I read it twice, then a third time. It was not the bride's family. It was not a regulation. It was not about security. It was Graham. He had looked at the guest list, seen his own sister, and decided that my presence would lower the aesthetic value of his day. I saved a screenshot of the email. I moved it to a hidden folder. Then I took the navy blue dress out of the closet. I did not burn it. I did not throw it away. I hung it back up, right at the front, where I would see it every single morning. I wanted to remember. I wanted to remember that they did not leave me out by accident. They left me out by design, and if they could edit me out of a wedding, I had to be careful, or they would edit me out of my own life. Okay, I whispered to the empty room. Okay. I closed the note. I had my first entry. I had a feeling it would not be the last. 3 years later, my sister Renee got engaged to a man who owned a chain of car dealerships, and suddenly, my invisibility became inconvenient. Renee did not want a ghost. She wanted a production assistant. She came to my dorm room a month after the proposal. I was 22 years old, finishing my final year of college and working 2 jobs to keep my student loans from drowning me. Renee sat on my twin bed, careful not to let her cashmere coat touch the wall, and flashed a diamond that looked heavy enough to sink a small boat. "Ivy?" she said, grabbing my hands with a warmth that felt suspiciously like desperation. "You are the artistic one. You have that eye. I need this wedding to be perfect. And honestly, the vendors in this town have zero taste. I need you." It is embarrassing to admit how quickly my defenses crumbled. After Graham's wedding, I had sworn I would never let them use me again. I had my little note in my phone. I had my anger. But Renee was my big sister, and when she looked at me with those wide, pleading eyes, asking for my help, a small, pathetic part of me thought, maybe this time is different. Maybe if I am useful enough, they will have to keep me. I became the unofficial, unpaid art director of the Renee Cox wedding experience. For 6 months, I did not sleep. I designed the invitations by hand, sketching intricate floral borders that took 3 hours per card. I calligraphed 400 envelopes because Renee said my handwriting was more authentic than a printer. I spent my weekends sourcing vintage brass candlesticks from thrift stores because Renee wanted a rustic chic aesthetic but did not want to pay rental prices. I glued, I painted, I tied thousands of tiny silk ribbons. My apartment smelled of spray adhesive and dried eucalyptus. "You are a lifesaver, Ivy," Renee would say, breezing in to pick up a box of finished centerpieces before breezing right back out to meet her friends for brunch. "I do not know what I would do without you." She fed me crumbs of inclusion. One afternoon, she dragged me to a bridal boutique. "Just try this on," she said, holding up a sage green bridesmaid dress. "I want to see how the color looks on a real person. The models in the catalog are too tan." I put the dress on. It fit perfectly. I stood in front of the 3-way mirror, smoothing the fabric over my hips. For a moment, I allowed myself to imagine standing at the altar next to my sister, holding her bouquet, being part of the picture. Renee snapped a photo of me with her phone. "Gorgeous," she said. "The color pops. Okay, take it off. We need to go look at tablecloths." She never mentioned the dress again. She never asked for my measurements. She never told me the price. But she kept the photo on her phone, showing people the vision for her bridal party. I was not a person to her. I was a mannequin. 2 weeks before the wedding, the silence started. It was subtle at first. I would ask about the rehearsal dinner time, and she would change the subject. I would ask when I needed to be at the venue to set up the archway I had built from scratch, and she would say, "Oh, the coordinator will handle the timeline." Then came the text. It arrived 7 days before the ceremony. I was sitting on my floor, surrounded by 300 hand-painted place cards that were drying on newspaper. "Hey, Ivy. So, slight change of plans. The guest list is totally locked down and we are super over capacity. The venue is being strict about numbers. Also, we decided to go for a total adults-only vibe, like serious party atmosphere, so do not worry about coming. We will celebrate privately later. Love you. I stared at the phone. I was 22. I could vote. I could drink. I paid taxes. I was an adult. The adults-only vibe excuse was so thin it was transparent. It was an insult to my intelligence. It was not about age. It was about class. It was about the fact that my car was rusted and my clothes were from discount racks, and Renee was marrying into a family that judged people by the shine of their shoes. I typed back, my fingers shaking, Renee, I am 22. I am your sister. I made the invitations. I made the centerpieces. What is the real reason? I watched the 3 little dots appear. Then they disappeared. She did not reply. She did not even have the courage to lie to me again. The anger did not come immediately. What came first was a cold, pragmatic realization. I had 3 huge boxes of decor in my living room. The brass candlesticks, the hand-painted signs, the table numbers, that she needed for the wedding. She had uninvited me, but she still expected her free labor to arrive. 2 days before the wedding, I loaded my car. I drove to the venue, a sprawling vineyard estate called the Golden Vine. I did not go to cause a scene. I went because I wanted to look her in the eye when I handed over the things I had made. I wanted her to feel the weight of what she was doing. I pulled up to the service entrance. A security guard with a clipboard stepped in front of my car. Name? He asked. Bored. Ivy Cox, I said. I am the bride's sister. I am dropping off the decor. He ran his finger down a laminated list. He flipped the page. He ran his finger down the second page. I do not have an Ivy Cox on the vendor list or the guest list, he said. I am not a vendor, I said, my voice tightening. I am family. Look, miss, he said, leaning on my window. If you are not on the list, you do not get in. Strict orders. We can't have randoms crashing the setup. Randoms. I made the things in this trunk, I said, gesturing to the back. The bride needs them. Then leave them here, he said, pointing to a concrete loading dock next to a dumpster. Someone will run them up. I got out of the car. I opened the trunk. I started unloading the boxes. The brass candlesticks clattered. The hand-painted signs looked pathetic against the gray concrete. As I set down the last box, a woman in a headset scurried out. She looked stressed. She was holding a clipboard and a stack of papers. Are these the centerpieces? She asked, not looking at me. Thank God. Renee has been screaming about them all morning. You're welcome, I said flatly. She glanced at me, then thrust a piece of paper into my hand. Here, she said. Since you are here, can you just sign the delivery confirmation? And here's the copy of the final expense invoice for the records. Renee said to just file it. She ran back inside before I could speak. I looked down at the paper in my hand. It was an invoice for decor materials and rush fees. It listed the paints, the paper, the ribbons, all the things Renee had told me to buy. But my eyes drifted to the bottom, to the payment information. Paid in full. Method. Visa ending in 4129. Cardholder. Ivy Cox. The world stopped spinning. The air left my lungs in a sharp, painful rush. 4129. That was my debit card. The one I had opened when I was 18. The one I had given to my mother 3 years ago, before I left for college. Just for emergencies, I had told her to keep it in the safe in case I ever lost my wallet and needed a transfer. I had never used it. I thought it was dormant. I looked at the total. $2,450. I felt sick. Physically sick. The months of labor. The sleepless nights. The glue burns on my fingers. That was one thing. I could handle being used for my time. I was used to that. But this? They had used my money to buy the materials for the wedding I was banned from. Renee had not just asked me to make the decorations. She had charged me for the privilege of making them. I stood there on the loading dock, the wind whipping my hair across my face. I looked at the boxes of beautiful things I had created. I looked at the closed gate of the venue. They did not just want me invisible. They wanted me to pay for the scenery they stood in front of. I did not scream. I did not storm the gate. I took out my phone. I took a picture of the invoice. I took a picture of the boxes sitting next to the dumpster. Then I walked back to my car. I sat in the driver's seat and opened the banking app on my phone. I typed in the password. I had not checked this account in years because I thought it was empty. I scrolled through the history. May 12th. Arts and Crafts Supply, $400. June 1st. Vintage Market, $300. July 10th. Silk Ribbons Direct, $250. Page after page of transactions, all under the threshold that would trigger a fraud alert, all timed perfectly with Renee's wedding planning schedule. I lowered the phone. My hands were not shaking anymore. This was not a family dynamic. This was a crime. I put the car in reverse as I drove away from the vineyard, leaving my hard work and my stolen money behind. I realized something that changed everything. I had been keeping score in a notebook, thinking we were playing a game of emotional warfare, but we were not. They were running a business, and I was their favorite investor. "Okay," I said aloud, my voice steady in the quiet car. "If you want a transaction, I will give you a transaction." My brother Caleb was not a man who believed in romance. He believed in mergers. When he announced his engagement to the daughter of a real estate tycoon, nobody in the family talked about love or compatibility. They talked about market shares and consolidation. His wedding was not scheduled at a church or a garden. It was booked at the Harborview Registry, a venue that felt less like a place to exchange vows and more like a place to sign a treaty. It was all glass, steel, and expensive minimalism. 2 weeks before the event, Caleb called me. His voice was brisk, the same tone he used when ordering takeout. "Ivy," he said, "listen, the ceremony itself is going to be incredibly dry. Just immediate stakeholders and the legal teams. You would be bored out of your mind. Just come to the reception afterwards. It is going to be a massive networking event. Open bar, great food. It will be more fun for you." "Stakeholders," I repeated. It was a strange word to use for a wedding, but with Caleb, it fit. "Exactly," he said. "So, 8 o'clock. Don't be late. It is a good opportunity for you to see how the other half lives." I wanted to say no. After Graham and Renee, I should have said no. But there is a sickness in being the outcast sibling. You keep thinking that if you just show up to one more event, if you just smile a little brighter or dress a little better, the dynamic will shift. You think that eventually, they will run out of reasons to push you away. So, at 7:45 on the night of the wedding, I walked up the limestone steps of the Harborview Registry. The air smelled of sea salt and expensive cologne. I was wearing a black dress I had bought on sale, careful to look professional, just like Caleb had implied I should. I walked to the reception desk, where 2 women in matching silk blouses were managing the guest list on tablets. "Name?" the first woman asked, her smile practiced and thin. "Ivy Cox," I said. "Sister of the groom," she tapped on her screen. I watched her finger scroll. "Ah, yes," she said. "Ivy Cox. I see you right here." For a split second, relief washed over me. I was on the list. I was actually on the list. Maybe Caleb had meant it. Maybe this was the night I stopped being a ghost. But before she could hand me my table assignment, a hand reached over her shoulder. It was a man in a sharp suit, wearing a headset and holding a red marker. He looked at the screen, then looked at me. His eyes were cold, assessing my dress, my shoes, and the car key I was holding. He made a judgment in less than a second. "No," he said. He took the red marker and right in front of my face, he drew a thick, aggressive line through my name on the printed backup list lying on the desk. The sound of the marker screeching against the paper was the only sound in the lobby. "Excuse me?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "This is a closed session for the reception," the manager said, not apologizing, just stating a fact. The groom gave specific instructions 10 minutes ago. Partners and primary investors only. No plus ones. No extended family. I am not extended family, I said, my hand gripping the edge of the desk. I am his sister. The manager looked bored. The list is finalized. Miss, we are at capacity for the venue's fire code. If you are not a listed partner, you cannot enter. Please clear the entryway for the other guests. I stood there, frozen, behind me. A group of men in tuxedos pushed past, laughing about stock prices. They were strangers, but they were partners. They belonged. I was blood, but I was a liability. I walked back down the limestone steps, my heels clicking loudly on the pavement. My phone buzzed in my clutch. It was a text from my mother. I saw you at the entrance on the security feed. Please do not make a scene. Ivy, if you come in, people will ask questions about what you do and why you are not involved in the family business. It is exhausting to explain. Just go home. We will send you some cake. I stared at the message. Exhausting to explain. That was it. That was the truth they had been hiding behind regulations and adults-only vibes for years. I was not banned because I was bad. I was banned because I was inconvenient. I was a detail that ruined their perfect, high-gloss narrative. To them, a family was not a group of people who loved each other. It was a brand. And I was off-brand. I got into my car, but I did not drive away immediately. I sat in the dark, watching the valet park Ferraris and Bentleys. Something about the manager's words stuck in my head. Partners, investors, and then I remembered the invoice from Renee's wedding, the one paid for by my old debit card. A cold, investigative calm settled over me. It was different from the hurt I had felt before. This was clinical. If I was not a family member, if I was just a failed transaction to them, then I needed to see the ledger. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app again. I had flagged the charges from Renee's wedding, but now I looked deeper. I went back 2 years, then 3. I searched for specific keywords: floral, deposit, catering, rental. The screen populated with results. There was a charge for $200 to a florist in Pennsylvania. Dated 3 days before Graham's wedding. There was a charge for $150 to a luxury car rental service. Dated the morning of Caleb's engagement party. There was a deposit of $500 to a venue called the Azure Room, dated last spring, for my mother's birthday party, which I had not been invited to. The amounts were never huge. They were small enough to look like gas. Groceries, or minor splurges. They were parasitic, siphoning off $50 here, $80 there. But how? I had changed my password after Renee's wedding. I had locked everything down. I looked at the transaction details for the car rental. There was a button that said, View Receipt. I clicked it. The app prompted me. Receipt sent to email on file. I checked my email. Nothing. I frowned. I called the customer service number for the rental agency, putting the phone on speaker as I watched Caleb's guests walk into the party I was banned from. Thank you for calling, the automated voice said. For a copy of your latest receipt, please verify your email address. ivy.cox@email.com, I said. That does not match our records, the agent said when he finally came on the line. The email on file for this account is ivycoxdesign@email.com. I froze. I did not have an email address called Ivy Cox Design. Can you tell me when that email was added? I asked. It looks like it was the primary contact created 4 years ago, the agent said. Would you like to reset the password? Yes, I said. Okay, I need you to answer the security question on file. I held my breath. If this was a hacker, the question would be random. The question is, the agent said, what was the name of your first childhood pet? My heart stopped. Buster, I whispered. That is correct, the agent said. Sending the reset link now. I hung up. Only 4 people in the world knew about Buster. Buster was a golden retriever we had when I was 6. He died when I was 8. It was a piece of family trivia that no identity thief would know. I logged into the fake email account. It was a graveyard of invoices. There were hundreds of emails, confirmations for flower deliveries, receipts for tablecloth rentals, digital contracts for catering deposits, all of them under the name Ivy Cox, all of them for events I was explicitly told not to attend. They had created a digital ghost of me. They used my credit score, my name, and my old financial data to float the small costs of their extravagant lives. They kept the amounts small so I would not notice, and they routed the receipts to an inbox I did not know existed. I sat in my car outside the Harborview Registry, the glow of the phone screen illuminating my face. I did not cry. I did not scream. I felt a heavy steel door slam shut inside my chest. For years, I had thought the problem was that they did not love me enough to invite me. I thought I was just the uncool sister, the embarrassing relative. I was wrong. They did not exclude me because they were ashamed of me. They excluded me because it is easier to steal from someone when you do not have to look them in the eye. I was not a sister. I was a resource. I took a screenshot of the inbox. I took a screenshot of the profile settings showing the recovery phone number, my mother's cell phone number. Then I put the car in gear. I drove away from the wedding, leaving the partners and the investors to their champagne. I was done asking for a seat at the table. I was done wondering why I wasn't good enough. They wanted a business relationship? Fine. I was about to become the most difficult auditor they had ever met. Moving to Briar Glen, Colorado, did not feel like an escape. It felt like someone had finally opened a window in a room that had been sealed shut for 20 years. I packed my life into the back of my car. 2 suitcases, a box of books, and the navy blue dress I could not bring myself to throw away. And I drove west until the humidity of Pennsylvania was replaced by the dry, sharp air of the Rockies. I did not leave a note. I did not make a dramatic announcement at Sunday dinner. I just left, in Briar Glen. I was not Ivy the invisible sister. I was just Ivy. I enrolled at Redstone Valley College to finish my degree, taking night classes while working during the day. It was exhausting, but it was a good kind of tired. It was the kind of tired that comes from building something for yourself, not from carrying the emotional luggage of 4 other people. I found a job as a junior analyst at a firm called North Pine Ethics and Compliance. It was not a glamorous job. It involved staring at spreadsheets, verifying vendor contracts, and ensuring that corporate policies were being followed to the letter. My siblings would have laughed at it. Graham would have called it tedious. Renee would have said it lacked vision, but I loved it. I loved the black and white nature of it. In compliance, there were no gray areas where family loyalty could hide a lie. There were receipts, there were timestamps, and there were signatures. If something did not match, you did not ignore it to keep the peace. You flagged it. You investigated it. You fixed it. For the first time in my life, I was working in a world where the truth was mandatory, not optional. I made friends, real friends. There was Sarah, a hiking guide who had never worn a designer dress in her life, and Mark, a barista who remembered that I liked oat milk in my latte without me having to remind him every single day. When we went out for drinks on Friday nights, they did not ask me, "So, what does your family do?" Or, "Why aren't you working at the Cox firm?" They asked. "Are you okay? You look a little tired today," they asked. "Do you want to go to the lake this weekend?" It was disorienting at first. I kept waiting for the catch. I kept waiting for them to hand me a bill or ask me to organize their birthday parties for free. But the request never came. They just wanted my company. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Marisol Navarro. She was a stern woman with kind eyes who did not let me get away with minimizing my pain. I was just the mature one, I told her during our 3rd session, twisting a tissue in my hands. My mom always said that I was the one who didn't need attention. I was low maintenance. "Doctor," Navarro took off her glasses and looked at me. "Ivy," she said, her voice steady. "They did not call you mature as a compliment. They called you mature to keep you silent. Mature was the label they used to make you feel responsible for their neglect. If you complained, you weren't being mature anymore. Were you?" I sat there, the air humming in the quiet office. It was true. Every time I had tried to speak up, about the wedding invitations, about the exclusion, about the unfairness. They had sighed and said, "Oh, Ivy, grow up." They had weaponized my own desire to be good against me. That night, I went home to my small apartment and opened my laptop. It was time to stop being mature and start being thorough. I began the process of financial separation. It was surgical. I called the credit bureaus. I requested a full history of every account opened in my name for the last 10 years. I changed every password I owned to a string of random characters that not even I could memorize without a manager. I closed the old checking account, the one I had found the venue charges on. The bank teller asked if I wanted to transfer the balance to a new account. "No," I said. "Just close it. Cut the tie." Then I started combing through the credit report. Most of it was standard. My student loans, my car payments. But then, on page 4, I saw it. A personal loan for $5,000. The date was 5 years ago. I did calculations in my head. I was 21 years old then. I was a junior in college. I was eating instant noodles to save money. I had never taken out a personal loan. But the date coincided perfectly with the month of Renee's wedding. I remembered that month. Renee had gone over budget on the flowers. She had called me crying, saying the florist was going to pull out if they did not get a rush deposit. Mom had told me not to worry about it, that they would move some things around. They had moved some things around. All right, they had moved debt onto my credit score. I stared at the entry, $5,000. It had been paid off over 2 years, likely using the minimum payments to avoid alerting me, but the interest alone would have been hundreds of dollars. My first instinct was to call the police. My hand hovered over the phone. I wanted sirens. I wanted handcuffs. I wanted them to be humiliated the way they had humiliated me. But then I remembered the advice I had received from a legal aid clinic the week before. "If you make a big scene now," the lawyer had told me, "they will flip the script. They will say it was a family misunderstanding. They will say they had your verbal permission, without hard documentation. It becomes a he said, she said, and wealthy families are very good at winning those. Gather your evidence, build a fortress, do not fire a shot until you can sink the ship." I lowered the phone. He was right. If I called them now, they would gaslight me. "Oh, Ivy, you forgot. We talked about this. Oh, Ivy, don't be dramatic. We paid it back. I needed to know who did it." Specifically, I called the bank that had issued the loan. I spent 3 hours on hold, transferred from department to department, using my new skills from North Pine to navigate the bureaucracy. I quoted the Fair Credit Reporting Act. I demanded the original promissory note. Finally, a secure document landed in my inbox. It was the digital application for the loan. Applicant: Ivy Cox. Social Security number, my number. Income: stated as $60,000. I was making $12,000 a year at the time. I scrolled to the bottom, to the signature block. It was an electronic signature. It just said Ivy Cox in a standard cursive font. Anyone could have clicked that box. But below it, there was a metadata stamp, a digital fingerprint that the bank kept for fraud prevention. Authorized user IP address, 192.168, device ID, iPhone 12, Marianne's iPhone. I froze. It wasn't Graham. It wasn't Renee. It was my mother, Marianne. The woman who told me I was the reasonable one. The woman who placed her handbag on the empty chair at Graham's wedding rather than fight for me to be there. She had filled out this application on her phone, probably while sitting in her sunroom, drinking tea. She had typed in my social security number, which she knew by heart, and lied about my income to secure cash for Renee's flowers. She had stolen my financial identity to buy hydrangeas. I looked at the screen until my eyes burned. For years, I had thought my mother was a passive victim of my father's ambition and my siblings' selfishness. I thought she was just weak. But she wasn't weak. She was the architect. She was the one who taught them that I was a resource to be harvested. I saved the document. I backed it up to 3 different cloud servers. I printed a physical copy and locked it in a fireproof box. I did not call her. I did not text her. I walked to the window of my apartment and looked out at the mountains. The sun was setting, painting the sky in violent shades of purple and orange. I had a choice. I could go to war now, scream and shout and demand an apology I would never get, or I could wait. I could let them think I was still the quiet, mature Ivy. I could let them think I was still safe. I chose peace, but it was not the peace of submission. It was the peace of a sniper waiting for the perfect shot. I went back to my desk and opened a new folder on my computer. I named it The Wedding Invitation. If they wanted me to be part of the family, I would be the part that finally held them accountable. "Okay, Mom," I whispered to the empty room. "You want to use my name? Let's see how much it is really worth." I met Miles Hart at a fundraiser for the local library roof repair. It was not a gala. There were no champagne towers or string quartets playing soft classical music to mask the sound of business deals. It was held in the community center gymnasium, smelling faintly of floor wax and popcorn. I was manning the silent auction table, trying to organize a chaotic pile of bid sheets for gift baskets donated by local businesses. Miles walked up holding a bid sheet for a basket of artisanal jams. He did not loom over me. He did not snap his fingers to get my attention. He waited until I finished helping an elderly woman with her reading glasses, and then he smiled. It was not a smile that wanted something. It was just a smile. "You look like you're about to organize a coup against the jam basket logistics," he said, his voice low and amused. I looked down at my color-coded spreadsheet. "I just like things to be clear," I said, feeling a familiar defensive prickle. If the starting bids aren't clearly marked, people get confused. "I like clarity," he said. He placed his bid sheet on the table, aligning it perfectly with the edge. "I am Miles. I teach history at the high school." "Ivy," I said. "I work in compliance." "That explains the excellent handwriting," he said. We talked for 2 hours. We did not talk about net worth or market trends. We talked about books. We talked about the best hiking trails in Briar Glen. We talked about why strawberry jam is superior to apricot. He did not ask me to shrink. He did not interrupt me. When I spoke, he actually listened, tilting his head to the side, processing my words instead of just waiting for his turn to speak. 3 months later, sitting on his worn-out leather couch, I finally told him about the weddings. I had been dreading it, in the past. Whenever I dated someone and the topic of family came up, the reaction was always the same. "But they are your family. Ivy, you must be exaggerating." Surely they didn't mean it. It is a universal reflex to defend the family unit, even when it is toxic. I told Miles about the navy blue dress I wore in the car outside Graham's wedding. I told him about the days I spent gluing rhinestones for Renee, only to be stopped by security at the gate. I told him about Caleb's reception and the red marker through my name. I finished the story and waited for the "but." I waited for him to ask if I was too sensitive. I waited for him to suggest that maybe I had misunderstood their intentions. Miles set his coffee mug down on the table. He did not look at me with pity. He looked at me with a fierce, quiet respect. "That is systematic," he said. "That is not an accident. They trained you to accept less than you deserve, so they could take more than they earned." I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 10 years. "You do not think I'm crazy?" "I think you are incredibly strong for not burning their houses down," he said seriously. Then he leaned forward and took my hand. His grip was firm, grounding. "Ivy, what do you want to do to protect yourself? Not what do they want. What do you need to feel safe?" It was the first time anyone had asked me that question. We built a relationship on that question. We built a life where I was not a utility player or a prop. I was a partner. 8 months later, Miles proposed. It happened on a Tuesday evening. We had just finished hiking up to a ridge overlooking the valley. The sun was going down, turning the sky a bruised purple. I was wearing hiking boots and a windbreaker. My hair was a mess. Miles did not hire a photographer. He did not hide a ring and a champagne glass. He just turned to me, reached into his pocket, and pulled out a simple gold band with a small, vintage diamond. "I do not have a production team," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I just have me, and I love you. Ivy, I want to build a family where you always have a seat. I want to build a home where you never have to check the guest list to see if you are allowed in," I cried. Not the polite, dab the corners of your eyes crying I had seen my mother do. I sobbed. I cried for the girl in the parking lot. I cried for the girl who paid for her own exclusion. And then I said yes. We decided on a small wedding at Juniper Ridge Gardens. It was a local venue, tucked away in the foothills, filled with wildflowers and aspen trees. It was not grand. It was real. The planning process was terrifying at first. Every time I opened a spreadsheet, I expected to see Graham's name demanding changes. Every time I looked at a floral arrangement, I saw Renee's invoice, but Miles was there. "This is our day," he would say, gently taking the pen from my hand when I started to spiral. "We make the rules." Then came the guest list. We sat at the kitchen table with a blank sheet of paper. "Who do you want there?" Miles asked. "Really want there?" I started writing. Sarah and Mark, my friends from work who checked on me when I was sick, Mrs. Gable, my third-grade teacher, who was now retired but still sent me Christmas cards, the team from North Pine, Dr. Navarro. I wrote down the names of the people who knew my coffee order. I wrote down the names of the people who had seen me cry and offered a tissue instead of a lecture. Then I reached the section for immediate family. I stared at the blank space. My hand hovered over the paper. The conditioning was deep. My brain whispered, "You have to invite them. It is a wedding. If you don't, you are the villain." I imagined Graham sneering at the rustic venue. I imagined Renee critiquing my dress. I imagined my mother sighing about how quaint it all was while checking her watch. But mostly, I imagined looking out at the audience and seeing them there, not smiling at me, but assessing me, checking to see if I had finally become the Cox they wanted. I looked at Miles. He was watching me, silent and patient. "They do not know me," I said softly. "They know the version of me they created to make themselves feel better. Then they do not get a seat," Miles said. I took the pen. I drew a firm black line through the immediate family section. I did not write their names. I just crossed out the obligation. I felt lighter. I felt like I could breathe. We sent the invitations out the next day. 40 people, no stakeholders, no networking partners, just friends. 2 days later. I was at work when my phone rang. It was the coordinator from Juniper Ridge Gardens, a sweet woman named Lisa. "Hi, Ivy," Lisa said, sounding a little confused. "I just wanted to double-check something with you regarding the timeline change." I frowned, putting down my highlighter. "What timeline change?" "We locked the schedule last week." "Oh," Lisa said, the confusion in her voice deepening. "Well, that is what I thought. But your sister called this morning. She was very insistent. She said the ceremony needed to be pushed back to 4 o'clock to accommodate the flight schedule for the VIP guests coming from Pennsylvania. She said you were too stressed to call yourself, so she was handling it for you." The blood drained from my face. The office spun. "My sister?" I managed to choke out. "Yes," Lisa said. "Renee?" She was very specific. She knew the booking reference number, Ivy. She knew the date. She even asked about upgrading the bar package to the platinum tier and billing it to the card on file. My hand gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. I had not told them. I had not sent them an invitation. I had not posted anything on social media. They knew. They had found out. And they were not waiting for an invite. They were doing what they always did. They were rewriting the script before I could even walk onto the stage. "Lisa," I said, my voice trembling with a cold, hard rage I had never felt before. "Listen to me very carefully. Do not change a single thing. That woman is not authorized to make decisions. No one is authorized except me and Miles." "Okay," Lisa said, sounding alarmed. "Okay, Ivy, I will put a lock on the file." I hung up the phone. I stared at the black screen. Renee had called. She had used her big sister voice. She had tried to upgrade the bar. They were not just coming, they were invading. I realized then that my silence had not protected me. Leaving town had not protected me. They did not need an invitation to ruin my life. They felt entitled to it by birthright. I picked up my bag and walked out of the office. I needed to find Miles. They wanted to crash my wedding? They wanted to take over the one thing that was purely mine? I remembered the invoice. I remembered the loan application with my mother's digital fingerprint. "Okay," I whispered as I walked into the bright Colorado sunlight. "You want to be involved? Let's get you involved." I was done building fences. It was time to build a trap. The phone call from my father came on a Thursday evening, cutting through the quiet hum of my life in Briar Glen like a siren. I was in the middle of reviewing a vendor contract for work, my mind miles away from Mapleward, Pennsylvania, when I saw Dad flash on the screen. My stomach tightened. Don Cox did not call to chat. He called to command. "Ivy," his voice was gravelly, stripping away the pleasantries before I could even say hello. "There is a situation at home. We need you to come back to Mapleward, tomorrow." "I cannot just leave, Dad," I said, keeping my voice steady, though my pulse was racing. "I have a job. I have a wedding to plan. Whatever it is, tell me over the phone." "I cannot tell you over the phone," he snapped, then lowered his voice, as if he were afraid someone was listening. "It concerns your grandmother Edith's estate. The lawyers are here. They are saying we cannot move forward without a signature, your signature." Grandma Edith. The name softened the steel in my spine. She had been the only person in that house who didn't look through me when she got sick during my sophomore year of college. While Graham was planning his wedding and Renee was busy being a socialite, I was the one who drove back every weekend. I was the one who sat by her bed, reading her favorite mystery novels aloud while the morphine dripped. I was the one who held her hand when she forgot who she was. "I will be there tomorrow," I said. I hung up and looked at Miles. He was already packing a bag. "I am coming with you," he said. "You are not walking into that lion's den alone." We flew into Pennsylvania the next morning. The air was thick and humid, a stark contrast to the crisp Colorado wind. Driving up the long, winding driveway to the Cox family estate felt like traveling back in time. The house loomed large and imposing, a brick fortress that held too many secrets. When we walked into the dining room, the scene was set like a courtroom drama. My father sat at the head of the mahogany table, looking older and more tired than I remembered. My mother, Marianne, sat to his right, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Graham, Renee, and Caleb were arranged along the side, their postures rigid, and at the other end, surrounded by stacks of legal files, sat Mr. Henderson, the family attorney. "Ivy," my father said, standing up but not moving to hug me. "Thank you for coming. Sit down. We need to expedite this." I did not sit. I stood behind the empty chair, Miles flanking me like a bodyguard. "What is this about?" I asked. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat and adjusted his glasses. "It is about the Cox-Warren Trust. Ms. Cox, your grandmother, Edith Warren, left a substantial portion of her assets in a protected trust. It was set up to mature upon her passing, which, as you know, was 6 months ago." "I know," I said. "I was at the funeral. I was the one who organized the flowers because Renee was too distraught to pick up the phone." Renee flinched. But Mr. Henderson continued. "The trust is structured to support the family business operations and personal assets," he said. "However, there is a stipulation regarding the disbursement of funds. Your grandmother appointed 2 co-trustees to oversee the release of any money. One is your father, Donald Cox." He paused, looking down at the document in front of him. "And the other co-trustee is you, Ms. Cox." The room went silent. I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. "Me?" I asked, genuine shock coloring my voice. "Why me?" "Because you were the only one there," Caleb muttered, staring at the table. "Excuse me?" I looked at my brother. "Grandma changed the will 3 years ago," Graham interrupted. his voice tight with suppressed anger. She said you were the only one who showed, quote, genuine duty and care during her illness. She locked the funds. Dad cannot access a single cent of the operating capital without your countersign. I looked around the table. The picture suddenly came into sharp focus. This was not about a reunion. This was not about them missing me. This was about a bottleneck. They were bleeding cash. I knew from my research that the family business had been leveraging debt to maintain appearances. They needed Grandma's money to pay off the loans, to keep the country club memberships, to fund the lifestyle that demanded adults-only weddings and exclusive guest lists. So that is it, I said, a cold smile touching my lips. You need my autograph. We need you to be reasonable, Graham said. Standing up and smoothing his suit jacket, he walked around the table, trying to use his physical presence to intimidate me, but I didn't flinch. Look, Ivy, we know there has been tension regarding the wedding. Tension? I raised an eyebrow. You mean when you banned me? Or when Renee tried to hijack my venue last week? We are willing to make a deal, Graham said, ignoring my question. You signed the release forms today, authorizing the transfer of funds to the general operating account. In exchange, we will step back. We will let you have your little wedding in Colorado. We won't interfere. We will even send a gift. Let me? I repeated. You think you have the power to let me get married? If you do not sign, Renee spoke up, her voice trembling with practiced tears. People are going to talk. Ivy, the creditors are calling. If the business defaults, it will be a scandal. Everyone will know the family is broke. Do you want to destroy everything Mom and Dad built just to be petty? Petty? I asked. I am not the one who erased a sibling from 3 weddings to maintain an aesthetic. You are playing the victim, Caleb said coldly. Finally looking up, you always do. You think you are so noble because you moved away and got a job, but you are holding the family hostage right now. You are doing exactly what you accuse us of doing. You are using your position to hurt us. I looked at them, really looked at them. They were terrified. They were 4 people standing on a trap door, and I was the one holding the lever. I am not hurting you, I said. I am just reading the fine print, something none of you ever bothered to do. I reached for the document Mr. Henderson was holding. Let me see the trust agreement. Mr. Henderson hesitated, glancing at my father. Show her. My father grunted. I took the heavy file. I flipped through the pages, my eyes scanning the legal jargon. I saw the clause about the co-trustees. I saw the list of assets. It was millions of dollars. And then, I flipped to the back page, to the section detailing the original setup of the trust fund accounts. My breath caught in my throat. There was a document dated 8 years ago. It was a standard authorization form, granting the family business limited access to the interest accrued by the trust. At the bottom of the page, there were 2 signatures. One was Edith Warren, the other was Ivy Cox. I stared at the signature. It was a good forgery. It had the loop on the Y that I used to do in high school. It had the slant. To a stranger. It looked authentic. But 8 years ago, I was 21. I was in college. On the date signed, October 14th. I was taking a midterm exam in a lecture hall 300 miles away. I had never seen this document before in my life. I looked up at my father. You have been accessing the interest for 8 years, I said softly. You forged my signature to get the liquidity you needed while Grandma was still alive. Didn't you? She probably told you I was the trustee. And instead of telling me, you just became me. My father's face went gray. It was a formality, he rasped. You were a child. You wouldn't have understood the financial complexity. We needed the cash flow to expand the Northeast Division. And now that she is dead, the bank requires a wet signature in person, I said, the puzzle pieces slamming into place. That is why you called me. You can't fake it when the auditors are watching. I looked at Graham. You don't just need the money, you need the cover-up. I looked at Renee. And you need me to have a big, happy wedding with the whole family present so that when the rumors start, You can point to the photos and say, "Look, we are united. Ivy is part of the business. She trusts us." They wanted my face for the public and my hand for the bank. Exclusion and exploitation were just two different tools they used to build their empire. When I was useless, they hid me. When I was useful, they harvested me. The room was deadly silent. The air pressure felt like it had dropped 10 degrees. "I am not signing," I said. "Ivy," my mother gasped. "You cannot be serious. This is $5 million. "I am not signing," I repeated, dropping the file onto the table with a heavy thud. "And if you try to forge my name again, Mr. Henderson here will be the first witness I call when I go to the district attorney." I turned to Miles. "We are leaving." "Ivy!" Graham shouted, lunging forward, his composure shattering. "You walk out that door, and you are dead to this family." I stopped at the threshold of the dining room. I looked back at them. My father, pale and defeated. My mother, weeping into her hands. My siblings, staring at me with a mixture of hatred and fear. "Graham," I said, my voice calm, steady, and loud enough to echo off the vaulted ceiling. "I have been dead to this family for 10 years. I am just finally signing the death certificate." I walked out of the house, Miles right beside me. We got into the rental car, and as we drove down the long driveway, leaving the brick fortress behind, I did not feel fear. I felt the exhilarating, terrifying rush of total freedom. They had brought me back to save them. Instead, I had just handed them the shovel to dig their own graves. Returning to Briar Glen felt like waking up from a fever dream. The air in Colorado was thin and clean, stripping away the humidity and the heavy, suffocating atmosphere of the Cox estate. But I did not come back to relax. I came back to fortify. Miles drove us straight from the airport to his friend Daniel's office. Daniel was a contract lawyer with a sharp mind and a low tolerance for nonsense. He listened as I laid out the timeline, the unauthorized account access, the small but consistent thefts, and the forgery I had seen on the trust document. "It is death by 1,000 cuts," Daniel said, looking at the spreadsheet I had compiled. They kept the amounts just low enough to avoid triggering major fraud alerts, but high enough to fund their lifestyle. It is smart, evil, but smart. "I do not want to sue them for the money," I said, looking at the total. It was around $28,000 over 8 years, a significant sum, yes, but not millions. "I want to make sure they can never touch me again. I want a wall so high they can't even see over it." We spent the next 3 days building that wall. We pulled my full credit history from all 3 bureaus, flagging every single inquiry that didn't originate from my IP address. We matched the dates of the charges to the dates of their weddings and parties. The $200 for flowers? That was the exact deposit amount for Renee's bridal shower centerpieces. The car rental? That matched the weekend of Caleb's engagement trip to the Hamptons. It wasn't just theft. It was a map of their entitlement. Every time they celebrated themselves, they sent me the bill. Once the evidence was locked down, I drafted the communication. I sat at my kitchen table, my phone hovering over the family group chat. My thumb trembled slightly, a phantom reflex from years of walking on eggshells. But then I looked at Miles, who was calmly making dinner in the kitchen, and the shaking stopped. I typed a message. It was short. It was surgical. "Regarding the wedding, we are keeping the ceremony intimate. The guest list is final and closed. No additional invitations will be issued. Please respect our decision." I hit send. I did not offer an explanation. I did not say, "I am sorry." I did not say, "Maybe next time." Explanations are negotiating tactics, and I was done negotiating. Then, I opened the physical archive. It was a plastic storage bin I had kept under my bed for years. Inside were the artifacts of my exclusion. The text from Graham saying, "Security is tight." The email from the planner saying, "Remove Ivy from the seating chart." The photo of the adults-only wedding where I saw children playing in the background on Instagram. I laid them out on the floor next to the financial records. On the left, the emotional abuse. On the right, the financial abuse. They were mirror images. They excluded me to keep their image perfect, and they included my credit score to keep their bank accounts floating. I picked up a pen and wrote a letter. Not an email, a physical letter, on heavy paper. It was addressed to my mother. Dear Mom, I used to think that staying silent was the price of admission to this family. I thought if I absorbed enough disappointment, eventually I would earn a seat at the table. But I realized something in Mr. Henderson's office. You didn't want me at the table. You wanted me on the menu. I am not angry that you didn't invite me to the parties. I am angry that you made me pay for them. Sacrifice is supposed to be a choice. Mom, when you take it without asking, it is just theft. I am closing the account. I am closing the door. Do not knock. Ivy. I sealed the envelope. I did not mail it yet. I needed one more perspective. I went to see Dr. Navarro the next afternoon. I showed her the plan. I told her about the security team I was hiring for the wedding, a firm called Ironclad Services that specialized in discreet perimeter control. You seem calm, Dr. Navarro observed. I feel calm, I said. I just worry that if I don't invite them, I am being vindictive. Maybe I should just let them come and sit in the back. Prove I am the bigger person. Doctor. Navarro leaned forward. Ivy, she said softly, listen to me. If you invite them, do you know what will happen? They will complain about the food? No, she said. If you invite them, they will use your wedding photos as proof that everything is fine. They will post them on social media. They will tag you. They will say, look at our beautiful family, so united, so happy. They will use your joy to bleach out the stains of their abuse. Your wedding will become their alibi. The realization hit me like a physical blow. She was right. They didn't just want to attend the wedding to control me. They wanted to attend so they could pretend the last 10 years never happened. If they were there, smiling in the front row, then the forged signature, the stolen money, the banned weddings, it all became just water under the bridge. I can't let them have that, I whispered. Then don't. Doctor, Navarro said, revenge isn't always about making people suffer. Ivy, sometimes, the most powerful revenge is simply denying them the narrative they want to write. I left her office with a new clarity. I was not trying to hurt them. I was trying to stop them from erasing the truth. I drove to the venue and met with the owner. I handed over a list of names and photos. These 4 people, I said, pointing to the pictures of Graham, Renee, Caleb, and my parents. They are not allowed on the property, under any circumstances. If they show up, I want them stopped at the road. Politely, but firmly. Got it, the owner said, sensing the steel in my voice. We will have 2 guards at the main gate and 1 at the service entrance. I went home and opened my laptop one last time. I logged into the vendor portals for the florist, the caterer, and the photographer. I changed every password. I set up 2-factor authentication linked to Miles's phone number, just in case they tried to impersonate me again. I locked every digital door. I barred every physical window. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Renee. Ivy, be realistic. Mom is a mess. You are really going to do this? After everything we have done for you? I looked at the message. Everything we have done for you. I looked at the stack of invoices on my desk. The $5,000 loan. The car rentals. The flowers. I didn't reply. I didn't block her. I just turned the phone over and watched the sun go down over the mountains. They could bang on the door all they wanted. They could scream and cry and threaten. But for the first time in 29 years, I held the only key. And I had no intention of unlocking it. 7 days before the wedding, the doorbell rang again. It was exactly 1 week until I was set to walk down the aisle at Juniper Ridge Gardens. I was in the living room with Miles, packing welcome bags for the guests who were flying in from out of town, friends from college, former colleagues, people who actually wanted to be there. We were laughing about a typo on the granola bar wrappers when the sound cut through the room. It was the same rhythm as before. 3 sharp, authoritative knocks. the sound of people who did not know how to wait. I froze. Miles put down a bag of trail mix and looked at me. "Do you want me to get it?" he asked. "No," I said, standing up and smoothing down my shirt. "I will get it." I walked to the door. I did not need to look through the peephole. I knew who was there. I unlocked the deadbolt and pulled the door open. They were all there, the entire committee. Graham stood in front, wearing a suit that looked like it cost more than my car. Renee was next to him, her eyes red-rimmed, but her makeup flawless. Caleb was leaning against the porch railing, looking bored, and behind them, standing like silent statues, were my parents. My mother, Mary Ann, looked fragile and aggrieved. My father, Don, looked grim. They did not wait to be invited in. Graham stepped onto the mat, blocking the door from closing. "We need to talk," Graham said. It was not a request. "Now." "I am busy," I said, not moving back. "I have a wedding to plan. A wedding you are not attending." "That is why we are here," Graham said, his voice dropping to that low, menacing tone he used in board meetings. "You are not going to embarrass us. Ivy, you are not going to ban the Cox family from a Cox wedding. It is social suicide." "It is my wedding," I said. "I can ban whoever I want." Graham stepped closer. I could smell his expensive cologne. "Listen to me clearly. If you do not invite us, all of us, then Mom and Dad will not be there either. You will walk down that aisle alone, no father to give you away, no mother to cry in the front row. You will look like an orphan. Is that what you want?" I looked at my father. He did not meet my eyes. He was staring at the floor, letting Graham do the dirty work. I looked back at Graham. "Is that the ultimatum?" I asked. "It is the reality," Graham said smugly. "We are a package deal. You want the parents? You take the siblings. You take the whole picture, or you get nothing." I felt a strange calm settle over me. It was the calm of a compliance officer who had found the smoking gun in a stack of audits. I did not feel like crying. I felt like reading the minutes of the meeting. "Okay," I said. "Let's review the package deal." I stepped out onto the porch, forcing Graham to back up slightly. I turned to Graham first. "September 12th, 2016, I said, my voice steady. "Your wedding. You sent me a text at 8 in the morning. Do not come. Security is tight. You told me it was a venue regulation, but I have the email from your planner. Graham, remove Ivy from the seating chart. She does not fit the vibe." Graham's jaw tightened. "That was years ago." I turned to Renee. She was clutching her designer handbag, looking nervous. "June 4th, 2019, I continued. "Your wedding. You told me it was an adults-only vibe. You uninvited me 7 days before the ceremony. But you didn't uninvite my labor. I made 300 place cards. I built your archway. And the day before the wedding, you charged $2,450 to my debit card for your flowers. Renee stammered, glancing at our parents. "I meant to pay that back. We were young. Ivy, we were stressed. We were just kids trying to figure it out." "You were 25, I said, cutting her off. "You were old enough to get married, but you were apparently young enough to steal from your little sister. Being young is an explanation for bad haircuts. Renee, it is not an excuse for credit card fraud." "Fraud?" Caleb laughed, pushing off the railing. "Oh, come on. You are going to use legal words now? You are going to sue your own family?" I turned to Caleb. "August 21st, 2021, I said. "Your reception. You told me to come for the networking. Then you had a manager draw a red line through my name in front of the entire lobby. You called me a liability. And while I was standing in the parking lot, you were using a fake email address under my name to rent a luxury car for your honeymoon. I am not suing the family." "Caleb," I said, my voice cold. "I am auditing the behavior, and the audit failed." My mother stepped forward then. She looked stricken. Tears were streaming down her face, but they were the weaponized tears I knew so well. "Ivy," she wailed. "Stop it. Why are you doing this? Why are you bringing up the past? We are here now. We want to be with you. You are destroying this family over petty grudges. I am not destroying the family. Mom, I said. The family was destroyed when you cropped me out of the photos 10 years ago. I am just the one who finally stopped pretending the picture was whole. We loved you, she cried. We did everything for you. You did everything to me, I corrected. My father finally spoke. His voice was heavy, tired. Ivy, enough. We can work this out. I did not know about the specific exclusions. I was busy with the firm. I thought you chose not to come. Graham told me you were busy with school. You didn't know? I asked. No, he said, looking at me with a glimmer of hope. I didn't know it was this bad. If I had known. If you had known about the weddings, would you have stopped them? I asked. Yes, he said firmly. We are Coxes. We stick together. Okay, I said. Then did you know about the loan? My father frowned. What loan? I reached into the pocket of my cardigan. I pulled out the folded piece of paper I had carried with me since the day I found it. It was the printout of the loan application for $5,000, taken out in my name 5 years ago. This loan, I said, handing it to him. $5,000, taken out under my Social Security number to pay for the rush fees on Renee's wedding flowers. My father took the paper. He squinted at it. This has your name on it. Look at the bottom, I said. Look at the digital footprint. He scanned the page. His eyes stopped at the bottom line. Authorized user IP address, 192.168.0.14, device ID, iPhone 12. Marianne's iPhone. The silence that fell over the porch was absolute. The wind rushed through the pine trees, but nobody moved. My father looked at the paper. Then he looked at my mother. Marianne stopped crying instantly. Her face went pale. She reached out a hand. Dawn, let me explain. It was a bridge loan. We were having cash flow issues that month. The florist was going to walk. I intended to tell her. You forged her signature, my father said. His voice was not loud. It was terrified. You used her identity. Marianne, that is a felony. It was for the family, she hissed. Dropping the Victim Act. We needed the flowers. We needed the image. You know how important appearance is. Not this important, my father whispered. He looked at me. For the first time in my life, he did not look at me as the extra child. He looked at me as the only person telling the truth. I didn't know, he said again. But this time, he wasn't making an excuse. He was making a confession. He folded the paper and put it in his own pocket. Dawn? My mother asked, her voice trembling. What are you doing? My father turned away from her. He did not look at Graham or Renee or Caleb. He walked to the edge of the porch, pulled out his cell phone, and dialed a number. The porch was so quiet we could hear the ringtone. Mr. Henderson, my father said into the phone. It is Don Cox. Yes, I know it is late. I need you to put an immediate freeze on all disbursements from the Cox Warren Trust. Yes. Everything. No. Do not release the operating capital on Monday. Dad, Graham shouted. Are you crazy? We need that transfer. The payroll. My father ignored him. I have reason to believe there has been internal mismanagement. We need a full forensic audit of all family accounts going back 10 years. Yes, starting with my wife's access. He hung up the phone. He turned back to me. He looked old. He looked broken. I am not coming to the wedding, Ivy, he said softly. My heart pinched. Just a little. Because I do not deserve to be there, he added. You were right to ban us, all of us. He walked down the steps, past his stunned wife and children. He walked to the car, got in the driver's seat, and stared straight ahead. My mother stood there, her mouth open. The mask had shattered. You, she whispered, pointing a shaking finger at me. You ungrateful little... Go home, Mom, I said. Before I give that piece of paper to the police instead of Dad. She turned and ran down the steps, Graham, Renee, and Caleb stood there for a second longer, looking between me and the car where their father sat, effectively cutting off their money supply. "You think you won?" Graham spat, his face twisting into something ugly. "You think this makes you happy? You just blew up the family. Your wedding is going to be a joke. Everyone will know you are the girl whose parents hate her." "Everyone will know I am the girl who survived you," I said. "Get off my porch." They scrambled down the stairs. I watched them get into the car. I watched the taillights disappear down the winding mountain road. I stood there for a long time, listening to the wind. Then I turned around and walked back inside. Miles was standing in the hallway. He had heard everything. He didn't say a word. He just walked over and wrapped his arms around me. I buried my face in his chest. I didn't cry. I felt a strange, hollow relief, like a fever breaking. "They are gone," I whispered. "They are gone," Miles repeated. I pulled back and looked at him. I looked at the welcome bags on the floor. I looked at the life we were building. "They came here to win," I said, my voice steadying. "They thought it was a negotiation. They thought if they pushed hard enough, I would fold." "They were wrong," Miles said. "They came to win," I said again, reaching out to lock the deadbolt with a solid, satisfying click. "But we came to get married." "Then let's get married," Miles said. "And let's do it our way." The morning of my wedding did not start with a team of stylists or a panic attack about the weather. It started with coffee on the porch and the sound of birds singing in the aspen trees. At Juniper Ridge Gardens, there was no staff running around with headsets screaming about timelines. Instead, my friends were there. Sarah and Mark were setting up the wooden folding chairs on the lawn. My neighbor, Mrs. Higgins, was arranging wildflowers in mason jars along the aisle. It felt less like a production and more like a community barn raising. Everyone was there because they wanted to help, not because they were afraid of being fired. I stood in the window of the bridal cottage, watching them. For the first time in my life, I did not feel like I had to apologize for taking up space. I did not have to shrink to fit into the frame. However, as the ceremony time approached, the air grew heavy with one specific absence. The 2 chairs in the front row, reserved for the parents of the bride, were empty. I could see the guests glancing at them. I could feel their silent questions. Is she an orphan? Is there a feud? My heart did a slow, painful throb. Even after everything, the theft, the lies, the exclusion, there was still a tiny, foolish part of me that hoped they would just show up and be parents. Not investors, not critics, just parents. Then, 10 minutes before the music was set to start, gravel crunched on the driveway. A black SUV pulled up to the main gate. It was not my father's car. It was a rental, sleek and aggressive. My stomach dropped. I watched from the window as 4 figures got out. Graham, Renee, Caleb, and my mother. They were dressed for a magazine cover, Graham in a tuxedo, Renee in a floor-length gown that looked suspiciously like a bridal dress in a different shade, Caleb in sunglasses, and my mother looking like the grieving matriarch of a dynasty. They walked toward the entrance with the confidence of people who had never been told no in their entire lives. They did not look at the security guards. They looked through them, but the guards did not move. I saw the argument start. Graham was gesturing wildly. Renee was pointing at the venue. My mother was clutching her chest. I took a deep breath. I turned to Miles, who was standing by the door, looking ready to fight a war for me. "Stay here," I said softly. "I need to do this." I walked out of the cottage. I walked across the grass, my white dress brushing the tops of the wildflowers. I did not run. I did not hide. As I approached the gate, Graham saw me. "Ivy," he shouted, his voice echoing off the mountains. "Tell these gorillas to let us in. This is insane. You are making a scene." "I am not making a scene, Graham," I said, my voice calm enough to cut glass. "I am enforcing a boundary." "You are punishing us," Graham yelled, playing to the crowd of guests who had turned to watch. "You are vindictive. She is doing this to get back at the family because she was jealous. She is ruining her own wedding just to spite us." The guests murmured. I could feel the tension rising. It was the moment they had always counted on, that I would be too embarrassed to cause a fuss, that I would fold just to make the shouting stop. But I was not 19 anymore. "No," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I am not taking revenge. I am ending a habit." Graham opened his mouth to scream again, but a car pulled up behind their SUV. It was a plain gray sedan. A man in a cheap suit got out. He held a stack of manila envelopes. He walked past the security guards, who nodded at him, and stopped in front of my siblings. "Graham Cox? Renee Cox? Marianne Cox?" the man asked. "Who are you?" Renee snapped. "We are in the middle of a family crisis." "I am a process server," the man said. He handed an envelope to Renee. "You are being served with a civil suit regarding the unauthorized use of a credit instrument totaling $5,000. He handed an envelope to my mother. "You are being served for identity theft and fraud regarding the loan application dated 5 years ago." He handed an envelope to Graham. "And you are being served with a restraining order regarding the harassment of the venue staff and the bride." The silence that followed was absolute. It was heavier than the mountains. Graham held the envelope like it was a bomb. Renee looked at the paper, her face draining of all color. My mother simply stared at me, her mouth working but no sound coming out. They had come to crash a wedding. They had walked into a legal deposition. "You," my mother whispered, "you called the police?" "I called a lawyer," I said, "and I gave him the evidence you kindly provided for 10 years. "You can't do this," Caleb hissed. "It will ruin the company reputation." The company ruined its own reputation when it started stealing from its own family members to pay for flowers, I said. "Please leave. You are trespassing." They stood there, paralyzed by the sudden shift in power. For the first time, their money, their suits, and their loud voices could not save them. Then, another car drove up the road. It was an old pickup truck, my father's truck, the one he used to drive when I was a kid, before the business got big, before the image became more important than the people. The truck stopped. The door opened. My father stepped out. He was wearing a simple suit, not a tuxedo. He looked tired. He looked old. He walked past his wife. He walked past his children holding their lawsuits. He did not look at them. He walked up to the gate. He looked at the security guard, and then he looked at me. "I am not on the list," he said softly. My throat tightened. "No, you are not." He nodded slowly. He looked at the ground, at his polished shoes. "I know. I just wanted to see you. I wanted to see that you were safe." He turned to go. He did not argue. He did not demand. "Dad," I said. He stopped. "The seat is empty," I said. "If you want it." He turned back. His eyes were red. He looked at the group of angry, shocked people behind him, the family he had built, the monster he had fed. Then he looked at me. "I am sorry," he choked out, his voice cracking. "I am sorry I left you alone in a crowded house for so long." He walked through the gate. He did not look back at my mother. He walked to the front row and sat down in the empty chair. He sat alone. My mother let out a sob, but the security guard stepped forward. "Ma'am, you need to leave. Now." I turned my back on them. I walked down the aisle toward Miles, who was waiting for me under the archway. I did not look back at the screaming, the crying, or the dust of their SUV as they were forced to turn around. The ceremony was short. It was simple. But when it came time for the vows, I looked at Miles, and I spoke the words I had written on the back of an old receipt the night I left home. "I promise to love you," I said. "I promise to hear you, and from today, I will not use silence to buy affection. I will never make you pay for your seat at my table." When the ceremony ended, I did not throw the bouquet. I walked over to the third row, where Mrs. Higgins was sitting with her 7-year-old granddaughter, a shy little girl with glasses who always waved at me when I walked to the mailbox. I knelt down in my white dress. I handed her the flowers. "These are for you," I said. "For me?" she whispered. "But I am not the bride." "You do not have to be the bride to be special," I said, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "You are always invited to the places where you belong. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise." She hugged the flowers to her chest. Beaming, the reception was perfect. There were no networking deals. There were no judgments. There was just pizza, dancing, and the sound of people laughing because they were actually happy, not because they were posing for a photo. My father sat in the corner, watching me. He didn't dance. He just watched, as if he were trying to memorize the daughter he had almost lost. 3 months later, I received a text message. It was a group chat from Graham, Renee, and Caleb, Ivy. "Look, the lawyers are draining the trust. Dad has locked everything down. We are willing to drop the countersuit if you just sign the release. We can issue a joint statement saying it was a misunderstanding. We need to save face, for the family." I looked at the message. I looked at the plea to save face. They still didn't get it. They thought the face of the family was something you could paint on. I typed one word, "No." Then I blocked the number. I sat back on the couch in our living room. Miles was asleep next to me, his head on my shoulder. On the wall across from us hung our wedding photo. I looked at it. There were no gaps. There was no empty space where a sister should have been. There were no red lines drawn through names. There was just me, Miles, my dad looking humble, and a crowd of friends who were smiling like they meant it. I smiled. It was the first family portrait I had ever seen that didn't have a lie in it. It was perfect, not because it was exclusive, but because everyone in it had chosen to be there. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Please comment down below and tell me where you are listening from. I would love to know how far this story has traveled. If you enjoyed this journey of justice and self-worth, please subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help more people hear this story. Your support means the world to me.